Hello? I got you. I got you some magical flowers. Do you like them?
They're gonna make you bleed.
Hello, my fellow tarnish. Now, I admit the start of this video was, much like the weapons we're going to talk about today, very special. Alright, look, listen. There is a general rule in Elden Ring when it comes to your various murder toys, and the rule, by and large, is essentially if the weapon has inbuilt sacred, holy damage, fire damage, lightning damage, magic damage, if it scales with arcane, faith, or int, if it has something extra going on, well then you cannot buff it, neither with the various incantations and the sorcery to give it added damage of a certain element or extra status effects. You can't grease it up with all the various greases, like grease fire, and grease sleep, and grease ice, and of course the best of all greases,
Grease lightning!
for example, this lowly little straight sword here that's got a bit of magic damage, a bit of int scaling, fires out a glitchstone pebble for the stab follow-up, a nice little weapon, but you can't buff it, because if you could buff it and add more on top, it would make it a little bit too strong. It's a balancing check, right? So that's kind of what goes on. Your somber weapons, your special weapons, your extra damage element weapons, you can't stack weapon buffs on top, which is a shame. If only we could. It'd be a lot of fun, you know? Look, I'm not going to be around the bush. You clicked on this video, you know what we're talking about today. There are certain weapons, very special, unique weapons that you can double dip, you can stack, you can have a weapon that deals both fire and lightning damage at the same time, and that's very exciting. So today I will present to you the 7 special weapons that let you really build some fantastically fun builds that no other weapon in the game lets you do. So, as you've been seeing, our example weapon to begin with is the Troll's Hammer. This is a weapon that naturally comes with fire damage. Now, you can't swap the Ashes of War on it, but, you know, that's okay. Troll's Roar is certainly not bad. But, again, it naturally has fire damage and it naturally scales with faith, which on most weapons would mean we can't buff it, but uniquely, we can, which means we can really combo it up here. We can add lightning, magic, we can add blood flame for some bleed and extra fire, we can add various greases and some cold, which lets us do some really fun things. For example, if you give it that sweet magic scholar's armament, well, not only do you add a load of magic damage with a high sorcery scaling glintstone staff, but you have that natural fire, so you can put on both the magic scorpion and the fire scorpion and double dip on that plus 12% damage to each element. And then you are hitting enemies for physical fire and magic at the same time, which means, goddammit, you're going to be hitting with something that they're weak to because you're hitting with so many different things. And that's really, really cool. You can really nichely laser tailor this combo of statuses and elements and effects while also having them on an incredibly base solid weapon. Let's move on then to Faith. I know this one was Faith, but this is the fire option. Let's talk actual holy damage, or at least one without it. We have the Erdsteel Dagger. This is the only naturally faith scaling weapon that you can change the Ashes of War on, and also buff, which makes it very much unique. It's just a shame, you know, it's a dagger, which definitely makes it less exciting. Then we have the Treespear. This comes with natural holy damage and faith scaling, but you guessed it, based on, you know, the theme of what we're doing today, you can buff it with all of the various buffs, letting you combo up the awesome Great Spear moveset and apply both holy and something extra at the same time on top of the physical damage too, which is really, really good. Annoyingly, the Ash of War on this weapon buffs it with holy damage, which overwrites all of your other buffs, so it kind of, sort of, well, invalidates that, but it's still nice that this is the only holy damage dealing weapon by default that you can buff. Now let's talk Arcane. Yes, indeed. It should also be noted that the Erdsteel Dagger, thanks to its natural faith scaling, if you make it scale with Inter Arcane, you can actually get a 4-stat scaling weapon, which, while weekly scaling with each, is fairly unique and neat in of itself. If you were 80, 80, 80, 80, you'd be doing some serious damage on a very high level character. We have ourselves ourselves the Ripple Blade, which is a just pure arcane scaling weapon that you can't change the Ashes of War on, but yes, you can buff. It's got a fine enough moveset, the default Ash of War Wild Strikes is also fine enough, but the thing you need to take into account here, and what makes this so uniquely potent, is that it's an arcane scaling weapon that you can buff. I know I just said that, but we really need to take that on board. Which means if you buff it with a status that benefits from Arcane, like for example Bleed, well then it's going to do really well. But you might be saying, well, yeah, okay, sure, but you could just get a natural Bleed weapon, put Seppuku on it, double dip that way, spec into Arcane anyway, and achieve a much greater effect than just putting blood grease on this Arcane weapon. True, however, what you can't do anywhere else is sleep grease. Soporific grease. Because it's a naturally arcane scaling weapon that you can buff, it's the only arcane scaling weapon that you can apply sleep to, which makes it a better sleep weapon than the actual only sleep weapon in St. Trina's sword. This puts enemies to sleep with 50 arcane and, leveled up in just 3 hits with the grease on. Compared to St. Trina's sword, which even buffed up with its own sleep buff, doesn't even put them to sleep in 4 hits. They die before they fall asleep here in our test. And the grease doesn't get knocked off your weapon when you get hit, whereas with St. Trina's, if you take damage, you lose the sleep buff. Which means, yes, if you craft a large supply of sleep grease, and you have yourself this arcane scaling blade buffed up with said sleep grease, you have the best sleep option in the game for pure sleep application, and can do some really potent things with it, which is really, really cool. Then we have its longer cousin, the Crescent Halberd, which is, what it says on the tin. The exact same things apply to this that I just said about the Crescent Ripple Blade, but obviously it's longer. It's got that longer moveset, it's got the spinning slash, and it is really quite good. Slightly less potent, but definitely the extra reach more than makes up for it. So that's really awesome. Then we have Varre's Bouquet, a very unique weapon already, but yes, despite being arcane scaling and coming with blood, and not being able to change the Ashes of War, you can buff it. In fact, when you acquire it and fight Varre for it, he is very much showing you the true power of this weapon. And let me put this in perspective, outside of being able to double dip, apply blood loss while dealing lightning or magic or fire damage and all of that good stuff, or apply blood loss while sleeping people with sleep grease, that's really entertaining too and very special. But if you blood flame this weapon, well, you've got yourself a weapon with massive amounts of natural bleed, extra bleed from blood flame, and the inbuilt Ash of War blood tax, which is extra bleed, and you find yourself with an absolute bleed monster. I got 2 bleed procs about 0.3 seconds from each other, which in a world of double katanas, seppuku up, arcane crazy, isn't the craziest thing, but once arcane gets its nerf and seppuku gets its nerf and that's kind of curbed, Varre's Bouquet might remain the one way to get ridiculous chain bleed procs, because you cannot double dip on bleed, but triple dip on bleed. Natural bleed, Ash of War, bleed buff, and that's really, really badass. Finally then, we have the int option, the magic damage dealing option, the Clayman's Harpoon. This spear, along with looking great and having a great moveset, naturally has a int scale and magic damage, and of course, like with all the others, you can buff it to double dip with anything that you would like. With the added bonus, and this is what makes this the most unique special weapon in the game, is you can also change the Ashes of War, which makes this the one weapon that in a default unbuffed state you can make deal double element damage, magic and fire, magic and lightning, magic and holy, which is really awesome, at least as far as I know anyway. And because you can then change the Ash of War, you can do some really silly, powerful things. You have yourself access to any Ash of War that goes on a spear, natural magic damage, and a buff on top of that to combine the three and get really cool results. In fact, results so cool I've made an entire video dedicated to this weapon and a monstrously powerful build to do with it that I will leave in the description. So there you are, everybody. That is your 7 special weapons. Weapons that let you double dip with buffs or Ashes of War or both on top of their natural, already extra power. And that's really, really fun, and they do indeed let you have really, really fun builds. So where do we get them from then? Well, from the top. The Troll's Hammer simply drops from this dungeon, and job's a good un. We get the Erdsteel Dagger from Kenneth Haight once we have got to the stage of his quest where he is stood here in Fort Haight having killed the Blood Knight, and that's his reward for you. We get the Treespear from a chest in a carriage on the end of a broken bridge in Liurnia, the one that heads back towards Limgrave. We get the Ripple Blade from the merchant found in Carrier Manor that you get to after the boss of Carrier Manor drop down and he is there. Whether he's alive or dead for you will depend on the state of your game, but either way, either from him or his bell bearing, you can purchase it. Then the Ripple Crescent Halberd is dropped from the Albinariacs in the lakes that actually drop it. This grace here is closest to 3 of them, and they are right next to it on a little bit of a ruin, and it will take some farming times to get all your extra item discovery on, but it shouldn't take too long to get that drop. Varre's Bouquet then comes from the end of Varre's questline. Once you have got to the Mogwin Palace, you will get to the grace just before the boss. If you turn around, there is an invasion sign for Varre's world, and you pop in, defeat him, and then once you come back out, he will be dying, and he will drop his bouquet. Finally, then, the Clayman's Harpoon comes from the Clayman down in Siofra River Well. Just farm them until you get one of them to actually drop it for you. Oh, and breathe. So there you go, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it's inspired some ideas for something you'd like to try, and I think it's really neat there are these exceptions to the rule that you can actually double dip with various types of damage, status, Ashes of War, and combinations. They really are a lot of fun. For now, though, like if you have enjoyed this, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss more tips, tricks, guides, funny bits, all that good stuff. Please consider supporting the future of this channel on Patreon down below. It is what keeps us going, and it does mean the world. Until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.